Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm Haxie Myers-Belkin. Coming up in the show, a South African High Court rules that President Jacob Zuma has 5 days to justify his firing of a respected finance minister, a decision that caused the rand to plummet and sparked renewed calls for Zuma to step down. We'll be crossing live to Cape Town. With just days to go before the French elect either Emmanuel Macron or Marine Le Pen as their next president, we take a look at what French voters in Senegal and the Ivory Coast are making of the race to the Elysée Palace. And with public faith in the Moroccan state school system diminishing, increasing numbers of parents are choosing to go private. We find out why. But let's begin in South Africa, where President Jacob Zuma has been ordered to reveal the documents he used to justify his decision to fire Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan last month. This after the country's High Court upheld a request for the information by the opposition Democratic Alliance Party. Gordhan and his deputy lost their jobs as part of a mass cabinet reshuffle, a reshuffle that led to the value of the rand plummeting and street protests calling for Zuma's resignation. Well, for more on this, we can cross live now to Cape Town to speak with our correspondent, Tim Butcher. Hi, Tim. Thank you very much for joining us. Zuma's been given 5 days to produce those documents, but he's previously said that it's very much within his powers to reshuffle ministers at will. How likely is Zuma to comply with this order?
Oh, I think we could anticipate some legal wriggling, appeals, challenges, trying to drag the whole process out. But what's odd here is that the president is, in a way, hoist by his own petard, because he himself said, I have a magic document, an intelligence document that proves that Mr. Gordhan is working against me and working against the nation of South Africa, and we must get rid of him. So some sensible voices within the ANC said, well, let's see that document, and that document's never been forthcoming. So the opposition party latched onto that, said, if you're serious, show us that paper, and that's what the court ruling was about today. Show us this supposed intelligence document that justified the sacking of a trusted and efficient finance minister.
Now, the mass protests that followed that cabinet reshuffle at the end of March were impressive. Just how steady is Zuma's grip on power at this point?
Well, you're right. They were steady then. Those protests began, and it's been going on and on. We're in May now, and this was almost, it was several weeks ago that this happened. But on May the 1st, on Labour Day, which is a big day in South Africa, which is a country, one of the rare countries in the world, which has a communist party involved in the ruling alliance, guess what? Mr. Zuma couldn't even speak at a trade union meeting because the people on the floor were booing so loudly. So the whole thing was canned and he was sort of ushered away. So this is telling us as observers that we're in new territory here. Mr. Zuma is genuinely in danger of losing the ground support that the ANC has always enjoyed under Mandela, under Mbeki, and for decades. And we're seeing that now. People on the street have had enough, not just the elite and the journalists and the lawyers and the observers and the political opposition. It's his own grassroots support that he's in danger of losing. And that's why this story has legs and is running, and Zuma isn't out of the woods yet.
Tim Butcher in Cape Town, thank you very much for that. It's time now to take a look at some other stories from across the African continent this hour. Somalia's youngest cabinet minister has been shot dead by security forces in what appears to be a case of mistaken identity. Abbas Abdullahi Siraji, the country's Minister for Public Works and Reconstruction, was killed when he was mistaken for an Islamist militant. 2 soldiers are in custody following the incident. Siraji grew up in a Kenyan refugee camp and was elected to office last year. In Burkina Faso, the trial of the country's ousted leader Blaise Compaoré and over 30 members of his government, all of them accused of murder, has been pushed back once again. The trial had been scheduled to open this Thursday, but it was pushed back to the 8th of May after lawyers for 2 of the co-defendants, both former ministers, said they needed more time to prepare. All those due to stand trial are accused of authorising deadly force against unarmed protesters during the popular uprising that removed long-term leader Compaoré from power in 2014. And Algerians have been voting in the country's parliamentary election, although turnout has been poor. Key priorities for voters this year: tackling soaring rates of unemployment and fixing an economy creaking under the weight of a collapse in oil revenues. But with newspapers full of allegations that candidates had paid to appear on party lists, levels of distrust of the political class are high. Results of that vote expected Friday afternoon. Now, it won't have escaped your attention that France is just days away from electing its next president. And that person will be either centrist Emmanuel Macron or far-right Marine Le Pen. They may be a little far from the action, but French citizens living in Africa are following events here closely before they too cast their vote. Nicolas Germain reports on the Macron supporters of Dakar and the Team Le Pen activists in Abidjan.
In this bar in Dakar, some chose to watch the football match. But in the room next door, Emmanuel Macron's supporters were glued to the screen showing his debate with Marine Le Pen. They tried to convince left-leaning voters.
I don't like Macron very much, but I prefer him to Le Pen, so I'll vote for him by default. But I'm clearly not in love.
It's clear that his policies are both social and liberal.
There are 13,000 French or Franco-Senegalese voters registered in this West African nation. Macron voters worry that only a few people will bother to vote on Sunday.
In Senegal, there was a very low turnout. It was around 72% in France, but here it was only 39%. This is a real cause for concern.
In Abidjan, supporters of Marine Le Pen held a press conference to urge voters to choose the National Front candidate.
This lady speaks the truth. Her policies regarding Africa are good. Those on currencies, on the relationship with France, on illegal immigration, I agree with her. Every week, young people die off the coasts of Europe. That's wrong. We need to find a solution. If they stay in their countries, they can develop them.
In the first round, Marine Le Pen gained 7.6% of the votes among French and Franco-Ivorian citizens here. That's 3 times less than her national result in France.
To Morocco now, where some 70% of children in urban areas go to private school. Increasing numbers of parents are choosing to fork out large sums of cash for their children's education. They believe it's a logical choice in a country where the quality of state schools is slipping. Others, meanwhile, warning against a 2-tier system that discriminates against those who can't pay.
Like many city-dwelling Moroccans, Ghislaine chose to send her children to private school. She pays roughly 3,000 euros per child every year. It's a necessary expense for parents who don't trust the public school system.
The standard is very low, so I can't allow myself to sacrifice the future of my children to save money. We're happy to do it.
Happiness comes at a price. School fees can go as high as 7,000 euros a year per child. While international schools remain popular, Moroccan options have been increasing. This private school in Casablanca teaches 2,000 students. Every week starts with the national anthem. The school prides itself on its demanding curriculum, anchored in traditional values.
Parents who enroll their children here are parents who are looking for a quality education, which combines the perfect command of both the Arabic and French language.
With 20 hours of weekly lessons, the teachers claim that the students quickly become perfectly bilingual. Subjects are taught in both languages.
It works very well. Sometimes we do joint projects in both French and Arabic, and the students have no problem passing from one language to the other.
Not everyone can afford such high-level education. Some have voiced concern at the increase in private schools across the country.
We want to rehabilitate the public school system, keeping it free but aiming for better quality. That is how countries develop, and it's the most important wealth we can share equally among all Moroccan citizens.
The government often involves the private sector in Morocco's national education, despite fears of creating a 2-tier education system.
That's all we have time for right now. Chris Moore will be back in just a couple of minutes with all the latest world headlines and analysis, so stay tuned.